Femi Oke, thank you so much for speaking to News Central.
You're so welcome. Good to be here.
You know, it's funny. I feel like I'm manifesting this moment, as I mentioned to you off camera. There's been a lot of getting to meet you. I've watched you very early stages of my career on a station that I love so much. And to have you in the same city as me is just fabulous. You started at 14, and I'm one of the young lucky ones to watch you. And then it's been 44 years, if I am to calculate, till now. Did you have any break in between? Or have you been working steady for 44 years?
I was on the radio when I was a 14-year-old, and I worked on a local radio station. It's a huge station called LBC, and it was the first talk radio station in the whole of the United Kingdom. And they had a program for young people, for kids, and I would report on that program. So I was still doing my O-levels, my A-levels, going to university, but that entire time I was on the radio, either in London or in my university city, and I would do my degree and then also go off and work for the BBC on my time off. So I was working and also doing broadcasting at the same time. So when I graduated, for my graduation day, I took my gown off, embraced my mum, and then went off to work at the BBC, same day.
Amazing.
So when you know what you want to do when you're young, it cuts out a lot of the time, a lot of the agonizing about what am I good at, what can I do? I knew immediately that I wanted to do broadcasting, journalism, radio, TV. I knew that when I was really young, and it's really helpful when you know that, because I'm not floundering at any time. So when you say, oh, your career has lasted this long length of time, well, I don't know. Does a 14-year-old have a career? But I've been broadcasting since I was 14 years old. Absolutely, yeah.
And the first phase I would consider was you worked in the UK for how many years before you went to CNN?
I moved to CNN in 1999, and I was in my early 30s when I moved to CNN.
So before you moved to CNN, what were the defining moments of those years? And would you say it prepared you for the international gig that you then went to do?
I worked everywhere when I was a young journalist. I worked in radio, I worked in TV, I was a producer, I was a presenter. I did everything. I did all the jobs. And often when you are thinking about, oh, I would like to be in front of the mic or in front of the camera, you move away from production and then you move in front of the mic or in front of the camera. But I realized that the true power in broadcasting is in production. It's your producer, it's your executive producer. So if you say, oh, I want to be on TV, I want to be on the radio, you are ceding your power away from production. So I continue to produce, to be executive producer, to work on all of those jobs that usually you leave behind as you become more experienced as a reporter and a host or an anchor. So I held on to those jobs because those jobs are where the decisions are made. I think the public think that the presenters and the anchors, the hosts, have the power. Some of them do, but many of them don't. They're doing what they're told to do. And so if you want to have that editorial control or input, then you keep those production skills going. So I did all of that all the way through as a young journalist, held on to the production post. Sometimes I would be on TV, sometimes I would be producing TV. Sometimes I would be on the radio, sometimes I would be producing on the radio. Any job that I wanted to do, I would do both of those. But I think, that's very immature. My immaturity was in that I love to travel, so I would just pick jobs that involved travel. So I'd look at a job and think, oh, producer for this show. I'm thinking, they probably have a budget to send me overseas. I'll take this job. Literally for the first decade of my adult journalism career, my strategy was just to travel.
Amazing.
Very immature, but really fun. How can you pick a job over just because they send you overseas?
But you know what? You knew what you wanted. And
it was fun.
I picked three things from what you just said now. It's like you knew what you wanted. So you cut out all the floundering and you focused. you put in the time and the work. I want to explore that a little because I started my career here. And what you just said now, a couple of seconds ago, resonates with me because I also started like that. And you got to do everything. I find that that's not a sort of work ethics that you have these days. I don't know have you had any chance to explore how newsrooms are now these days and to compare the old guard and see, in terms of quality, is there a problem there?
As a journalist now, you have to be able to do everything because the technology expects you to. So when I started, you'd have a separate sound person, you'd have a separate camera person, you'd have somebody who would be taking notes for the interview time. This is when it started, this is when it ended. You'd have a producer, you'd have a whole team of people who had very specialized jobs. And then bit by bit that changed into, oh, we can just have one camera, and then how about you set up your camera and you do that yourself? Or how about we only have 2 people or 1 person for the production team? How about you produce your own segment? So that's changed, and technology has allowed that to happen because cameras are no longer giant, heavy monsters. They're much easier to just pick up and walk around with. So the technology, particularly editing technology, has simplified and made it so accessible that a lot of journalists are able to do all of that work. So I would say yes and no to your theory that journalists are not doing all of that work. They kind of have to, particularly as budgets are shrinking. So I think it depends where you're working and what the demands are. But generally I would say young journalists are having to do a lot, the same as I did a lot when I was younger, just to get the foot in the door. Oh, I can edit, I can produce, I can do all of this. I do think that still exists, particularly if you're working on, if you look at some people who are working online, for instance, and they're on streaming services, they do everything.
It's true.
Kudos. It's exhausting just seeing what they do. Maybe they've got a friend to help them, maybe they've got a colleague.
Is that a good or bad thing for the industry? Let's talk about the industry in general. Like multitasking ability, you can do everything, but you're a master of none, or can you master everything? Like, how is that affecting the quality of what we put out in terms of content, the story itself, and getting the story right and still be able to do all this other stuff?
Do you know, my opinion on that doesn't really matter because it's happening. So adapt or die.
Africa is rising. Again, we hear our sounds echo on the other side. Afrobeat and Afropop reinvented, hip life brought back to life, new energy infused into Kwaito and Kwela. Africa is balling. Every stroke, every shot, every raise, we find our place at the top. Taking the helm of real power, new hopes for democracies. A breed of entrepreneurial tigers, audacious storytellers, and a promising generation raring to go. Truly, Africa is rising. And this is where the stories that define our continent live.
Yeah.
I need to find out.
No, but I feel like you're up to date because you ran the stream for how many years?
So I was the host of the stream for a decade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was at a time when, what's that? Like, streaming services was just coming on and you saw ahead of, was that your pitch or was it the station's pitch and you had to fit into it?
People often, because I was the host of the stream for a decade, people will assume and have assumed they can't remember any other hosts. But I was the 4th host. But people are like, yeah, you started the stream. I watched the stream, I think from like day 1 or week 1.
Unbelievable.
And I loved the show. I loved the show. I would watch that show and I would, I was living in Brooklyn, New York at the time, and it's streaming, so I would carry around my laptop around my apartment watching this show. I was like, this show is crazy. I never know what topic they're going to do, what day. They're doing stuff that I have never seen before. They were using versions of tech that weren't available to regular people yet, and the audience was engaged and talking to them. And I saw the show, I thought, I love that show. If I got to host that show, I know exactly what I would do. And I would just look to see if there was a job on the stream. And then one day I looked and it said host of the stream. And I applied like this instantly. And in my cover letter, I said, I watch this show. I love what you do. I know exactly how I would host it. And that's what I did for 10 years.
Wow. So this is a question you may have heard a lot. Why did you leave CNN?
I still hear it.
Exactly.
To this day.
Because, like everyone is like, why? Why did you leave CNN?
I was at CNN for almost a decade, so 9 and a bit years. And my plan was to get out before my 10th anniversary.
You have a plan for everything before you get into it.
For everything.
So I'm going to
very annoying person.
Oh, no, I love it. How important is that for younger journalists who are watching this episode? Like, how important is it to know what you want before you get in there?
How do you achieve it if you don't have a plan? How do you achieve your goals if you don't have a plan? And if you have goals, how do you get to them if you don't even just map out some possibilities? I don't know how to do it any other way.
Did you watch any other Black people on CNN before you got there?
There weren't really many.
Okay, so and then you presented a lot of shows, the weather, you did Inside Africa. Was there any anchor who was Black and a woman?
There was one gentleman who was there for a very short time, and then he left. Terry Badu was in sports, and Terry Badu is a very well-known presenter from the UK, so Terry had been there.
For many of us, you were the first.
Not many. I'll tell you a story about when I started at CNN and I was up in the room where you look at all the feeds coming in, so you can see all the video from around the world. And I happened to be in that space. And my producer my future producer Inside Africa saw me and said, oh my God, they've hired a real Black person. Because the tendency in America was to hire fair-skinned people, so lighter-skinned people, because that was a look that they were comfortable with. Darker-skinned reporters and journalists. Not that there weren't any, but those big roles tended to be people with fairer skin. So he saw me, he was like, oh my God, like a real melanated person, which seemed to have an impact because people who looked like me, boys and girls around the world, particularly Africans, would watch at the time what I was doing, the weather. And
my parents watched. Ha! Finally.
I can do that.
I can relate to
that. That job could be for me. And then my name was Femi Oke, although I say Femi Oke when I'm in Nigeria. When I'm not in Nigeria, I say Femi Oke. Because I have a South London accent, so that is my accent. So any Nigerians who think I don't know how to say my name, I know how to say your name. It's just hard work having an accent for just one word. So I think that had an awareness that was having an impact. Just me being on CNN, seeing me. But then after me came Tumi Makabo.
Wow. I like how you wrapped it all up. But I know that my viewers would want to know what next now in terms of, you said you're doing the moderate the panel. They also would like to know, if you're doing your thing now, is there a way we can cash in as Nigerians? Is there something in the offing that you're looking at? Any projects you're positioning? How can we tap into our national treasure? That is Femi Oke.
I have had for so many years on my career bucket list, must work in Nigeria, because I'm described as Nigerian journalist Femi Oke, or Nigerian-British journalist Femi Oke. And what have I done to earn that other than be born? And I wanted to really own that and earn that. And how do I do that? How do I spend more time in Nigeria? How do I work more in Nigeria? So that is I would say now it was on the back burner, now it's on the front of the stove. It's like, how do I do that? So I'm talking to people, chatting to people, working out what out of all of my different skill sets might work back at home. And I'm not going to be naive about it. It might be that it will be quite limited. It might be individual projects, but I'm really interested. I have this pull that brings me back to Nigeria, that makes me very proud to be Nigerian. And why should I be giving that all over the world, but not at home? It doesn't make any sense to me. So it's like, I have to be able to do that, and that's what I'm focused on right now, which was another reason why I felt that pause, that wrapping up of the stream was perfect timing, because when they asked me, will you go to Doha? I thought, hold on a minute, where was I supposed to be going? I was like, oh yes, I'm supposed to be going to Nigeria. Why am I going to Doha? I'm going in the wrong direction. Now is the time when I'm thinking, I had to think about, how do I come to Nigeria? And I was not born here. I'm 100% diaspora. So how do I do that? And I'm old enough and experienced enough now to be able to think about how you put that together, and who you chat to, who do you collaborate with. And it's not a certain thing, but I know it's something that I want to pay attention to, put some time into, and see what happens. But if I don't, I will continue to travel around the world
And do
but
nothing.
then skipping over Nigeria, and that's that. I can't have that happen. I can't be elsewhere in Africa giving them my skills, and I love to do that, but not do it at home. It feels weird, it's wrong. So I want to see if I can just change that dynamic a little bit more. So nothing concrete, but I thought I can't be thinking and sitting in London or DC about, I want to work more in Nigeria. How do I do that? I have to be in Nigeria to think about working in Nigeria. So that is what I'm doing.
Which was why I started this whole conversation about, you coming in and you spending time to be able to see what you can do for your home country. Well, I have a few ideas, collaboration training, because even though we have a lot of very talented journalists, I cannot tell you they'll be here next year. They might get a better job. Oh, maybe not a better job, a better offer outside, and off they would go. I wouldn't tell anyone who gets a better offer not to go. I did 10 years ago. What can we do better on the continent to make our journalism stronger, more competitive, and more compelling in a way that makes our people watch us and not wait till we get to CNN and Al Jazeera to watch us?
I think one of the biggest difficulties is the big international networks. Their standards are so high that when we compare what we're creating and we're producing, either locally or nationally, it's hard. It's hard for a report from a Nigerian journalist, from a Nigerian network, to actually be the same quality as a report from CNN, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle. So that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, for the audience, because they want to see that quality across the board.
How can we fix that?
But the journalism, I think the journalism should always lead. It's like, if the stories are good, people will come. If the stories are interesting and compelling and they reflect on the life that you're leading, people will still come. To be able to edit well and to put audio on, that's an easy fix. That's a straightforward fix. But getting the journalism that really, you can only get this if we're watching Nigerian journalists. We won't get that if we watch an international network. And I would often get complaints about, why don't you do more stories about Nigeria? Why aren't you covering our stories? And my response is, have you seen the show that I do? There's so many stories about Nigeria. So many stories about the African continent, not just Nigeria, because I lean into that. So I'm really happy to do that. But your Al Jazeera or your CNN should not be your domestic network. It's an international network. So you say that to your domestic network to tell those stories. And then international will do some, they will supplement it, but it's not your main storyteller. I would say that there's something very special about Al Jazeera, in that they care deeply about the
African stories, yeah.
And they will cover them. I remember watching the very first day of Al Jazeera English, and I counted the stories, about 8 stories. I was watching Al Jazeera at CNN in my studio, and those 8 stories would not have got on CNN in a week of broadcasting. In one day, 8 stories. I was like, I need to work there.
Yeah.
They don't cover Africa like it's
Yeah.
they cover it like it's every day. Their stories are important. They were here, they were here, they were here, they were here. Wow, look at all those lives from the continent.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I think that's also a reflection of the diversity in that newsroom.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So what you're asking is how can we fix it? It's a big, big, big challenge, and not one person's ideas can do it. But what I see is that people are trying on a daily basis. They're not like, oh, this is okay. Everybody is trying to do it. How do we do it better? How do we get better training? How do we get better at the quality that we're giving our viewers? So I don't think anyone is like, we're good enough. I don't see that. I see the effort.
And one other challenge that I think as you continue to come and continue to find ways to give back to Nigeria and the media here and on the continent, you will find something strange, which I have found, is the amount of years of work and being intentional in terms of scaling up your skill that you did when you started, that I did when I picked up. I don't see that much anymore. There is this celebrity status that comes with journalism and journalists these days. And in my opinion, I think that is an impediment in terms of the quality of work. Because what you see is a lot of talented people, but not very skillful. And it takes discipline in time to become super skillful. What's your opinion of that? And if you think it needs to be fixed, how?
Well, we live in an era of celebrity, of influencers, of people who have limited talent becoming incredibly famous very fast. America has an entire family of women who have no skills whatsoever other than promoting themselves, which actually they're brilliant at. But what is their actual skill set that they're sharing? But what they've taught us is you can turn being a celebrity into a job. You can turn being an influencer into a job. For a journalist, for me, we are not the story. And you will hear many journalists say, if I'm the story, it's a problem. If you're looking at me and you're paying attention to me and it's about me, then something's gone wrong in the process. Because as a journalist, I believe my job is to explore the story, bring the angles of the story, help us understand it, make it engaging, share it with the audience. How can I help this story have an impact with you that makes you understand the world better? It is not how famous I am, what club I go out to, what vehicle I drive, who I'm dating. None of that is relevant for journalism. But of course, a culture of celebrity will invade journalism as well. We're not immune to that. But I think if you're focused on the telling of the story, then why would you want to be famous for that?
What if you get famous along the way as you're telling the story? How do you handle that? You're famous.
I don't think I'm famous. I think sometimes people will recognize me, and I think that's different. There's a level of fame that I would say this person, if Tom Cruise walked in here, you'd be like, what?
Oh, there will be people who don't know him though. They'll be like, who's that guy?
Let me just think of something else. Beyonce.
Okay, maybe Beyonce.
Yeah.
But there will still be people around here who'll be like, who's that? That's why I never assume everybody knows me.
Yeah.
Especially as a journalist.
Yeah, but I would say there's a level of celebrity that belongs to sports people,
Right.
and singers, probably the biggest, and musicians, artists, where that level of celebrity where you cannot go shopping, you cannot leave your home, you can't walk down the street unless you're disguised in some way. That is celebrity to me. The fact that people would greet me and say, oh, I like that report you did. That is, they just acknowledge your work and they see you and they want to say hello and they greet you. The level of celebrity where you're a sports person or you're a singer, that's a whole different thing.
And it shouldn't come into journalism.
I don't think it has. I think there are very few people who has, and I think Oprah is a grey area, because I feel like she's evolved beyond the journalist that she was many decades ago.
Right.
And she's become something more.
Mm.
And she's a businesswoman and an entrepreneur,
Right.
and so much and a living icon,
Right.
even if you don't like her work. So she's evolved beyond that. So I'm not even sure. I think we all grew up with journalists that we like, that we admire.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure you would call them celebrity, but they're definitely people that we admire. That's from my perspective. I wouldn't necessarily call them celebrity. I know some amazing journalists. I know Christian Paul. I know Jim Clancy. I know Addison Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
So I know a lot of journalists. I don't think they necessarily think of themselves as celebrities.
Right.
They just happen to have a platform where a lot of people will see their work because they care about the work.
And it doesn't affect the ethics of the job, which is they work, they're
Yeah.
thorough,
Yeah.
they put in the time.
Where it can have a backfire a little bit is where somebody is so excited to see a journalist that you can see they'll be on TV or they'll be in an interview and they go, I'm so happy, I'm so happy to see you. My mum loves you, my kids love you.
I just did that to you earlier.
on camera, and it's on TV or it's on radio and it's live.
That can be.
And you've asked them to come in to talk about something, and they are so thrilled that they do that as part of which for me is like, ooh.
That's not what we're.
Like, how do you get past that? And then there's a balance of a relationship that's a little bit out of whack. Of course, we understand if someone's been on your TV for 20 years, or you've listened to them on the radio for many, many years, there's an excitement about seeing that person because they're part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they don't realize they're part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it feels a little strange to me to see that on the air.
Right. So as I wrap this interview up, and there are, I'm sure, many young journalists who are going to be seeing this, who have put in maybe 5, 6, 10 years of their career and who may or may not have watched you on the continent. What advice would you have for any of them looking up to you or who have looked up to you, who are praying to achieve, even if it's just a pint of what you've achieved or maybe more?
I will meet young journalists and they say, I want to be like you. And my retort is always, I want you to be better than me. Don't mold yourself, don't dress in yourself, don't be sounding like somebody else. Be your own person. And I worked that out a long time ago. If you're generic, bland, reporter type, good evening, welcome to 10 o'clock news, right? We've all seen that anchor voice. Then anyone can do it. If you're yourself, no one else can be you. You can only be you, and they can only hire you. So be yourself. You can have people who you respect and you admire, but your aim is not to be them or to be a carbon copy of them. It's to find your voice, to find what drives you and your passion, and always have a plan, because even if you deviate from your plan, you know you're deviating. And you think, oh, that's an interesting option, hadn't considered that, great. If you have no plan, how do you get to where you want to get to next? So those are the basics that work, not even just for journalism, for any career where you're having to work and it's a struggle and there's a lot of competition. I think it's worked in many parts of my life, not just in journalism.
Femi Oke, thank you so much for speaking to News Central.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.